Well, hello. Well, hello. Well, hello, Mike Manley.
Hello, Jamar.
Who's your friend on your shoulder?
My co-pilot Cornwell, my little buddy.
He came right up to the screen like, well,
He's
hello.
like, hello.
That's great. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to Pencil to Pencil. Is it not even bi-weekly, twice a weekly creative
Twice a weekly?
Twice a week. Yeah, I went to college. Twice a weekly creative podcast where your cartooning friends, Jamar Nicholas, Mike Manley, and Bret Blevins, talk about the nuts and bolts of comic book and creation and illustration creation and being a creative and creating. Hello, everybody who's joining us on Facebook Live and in color, also on YouTube. I hope
black and white.
Sorry. White. A quick intro. My name is Jamar Nicholas, Philadelphia born and bred cartoonist and man of letters, joined as always by my good bud and master of cartooning, Mike Manley. Say hi, Mike.
Master. Hello, everyone. I don't know. That's too much pressure.
Well, you gotta put the Kirby hands out when you say man.
Master of perspective.
We're back with another Pencil to Pencil episode. This is going to be kind of what we call in the offices a palate cleanser, but also taking us back to our original podcast at the beginning of the pandemic. We did a lot of comic book boot camp episodes where Mike would do some live drawing and talk about process and do some shot choices and really show you how comic books get made right in front of your eyes.
How you make the bologna, how the hot dog is made.
That's right. It's super important. And a lot of our fans and people that watch the show are either professionals, inspired enthusiasts, or looky-loos. And from all of those different sections of people, Mike, there's always something to learn. What do you say?
Yes. Yes, there's always something to learn at every stage of the game, no matter how long you've been doing it. Learn something every day.
Yeah, it's super true. So I can get rid of these assets. Let me give a plug to our sponsors, the good people at Graphicsly and Tomorrow's Publishing. Sponsor your Pencil to Pencil podcast. Graphicsly creates Clip Studio Paint, the cartoonist's favorite tool in their toolbox, and
which I'll be using later.
Oh yeah, I can't wait, Mike. And also our good buddy John Morrow, who publishes Draw Magazine, also runs Tomorrow's Publishing. Please go over to the site and buy all the things.
Buy 4 copies of it.
That's right. You buy 1 for the shelf and 3 to put on ice.
Do your Christmas shopping early.
That's not a bad idea. Like if you have a budding fan of cartoons who wants to learn more about the craft, that's a great stocking stuffer, Mike, to give him one of the books.
Had a 40% off.
Oh man, I love that. I love that deal. So let me clear these artifacts over here. Give us some screen real estate. Hello to everybody who's watching in the chat. Just to let you know tonight, Mike and I are going to put on our drill sergeant boots and take you through comic book boot camp.
That's right. What is your major malfunction?
So tonight, if anybody saw our plugs for the episode this afternoon, we are going to spend our time this evening doing a breakdown of a comic book script all the way to the creation of the page. So, Mike, do you want to give them a little primer of how that works? Or maybe answer a question about what people get wrong about comic book scripting and laying things out?
Well, I think, first of all, even if you're a comic book writer and you're not, Neil Adams or John Buscema or, Jack Kirby, you should be able to, and you should practice laying out a page yourself, even if you're just using stick figures, just to give you yourself an idea of realistically how much room your script and the art and the merge and have to work together in the real estate
Mm-hmm.
that we are given on each page. I think a lot of writers are not as visually literate for comics as they should be. And I think that's because they merge comics and other forms of visual entertainment. But each medium has very specific requirements and criteria. And very often in the beginning, I think a beginning writer will overwrite for what we need to show. And there's that balance you have to gain between what you want to write and then what would become redundant if you basically describe, it's a dark and stormy night, and then you draw a dark and stormy night, right? And also just to get a feel of the meter of reading a comic book page,
Mm-hmm.
which is different, I think, than writing a script. Because I think when people think of script, when people very often in the beginning are writing scripts, I don't know, I think they sometimes merge what you would do in a movie with what is happening on a comic, what's happening in a comic or on a comic page. And it makes it a little bit more difficult. Just like very often in the beginning, one of the things a young artist does is not leave enough room for the copy, and also to pull in too close, get in too close very often.
That's my problem.
And when you do that, it's the same thing, because then you're eliminating mood, you're eliminating background, you're eliminating details that the viewer won't see. And if one of the things I always said in class was, if you don't show it, the viewer doesn't know it. The people can only know what we show them.
Right,
we can't know what's inside of somebody's head, or what you meant.
Yeah.
Right? You can either read it or you can see it. And if that combination does not inform the viewer, they're just not going to understand what the depth of your narrative. There'll be stuff that will go off. And the thing about comics is, just like film, we sort of enter this dimension where when you start reading it, at first you might be aware of the fact, oh, I just picked up a comic book and I'm reading it. But eventually you kind of click off from being aware. I mean, you're turning the pages and you're reading it, but your consciousness is like injected into the page. Just like when you go to the movies, you get your popcorn, you sit down, you start watching, and then eventually you're in it. You know what I mean?
Right,
and
right.
If anything happens for you to fall out of that little magic spell, it's almost impossible to fall back in. And I think that just like when you're reading a book, right? When you're reading a book, literature requires the most of your CPU, because you have to create, even though you're reading the words and the descriptions and the dialogue, you're having to create it all in your head. So the better your imagination is, the better you're at, creating the narrative and falling into the magic spell. So I remember Archie Goodwin used to do little layouts. He used to do that. And so I always encourage everybody to, whether you're not going to, draw comics, is to actually, I would give them like a little 6-panel grid. And just, even if you're just drawing stick figures, it gives you a real feel for how the information flows across the page.
So yeah, now one thing for the audience that may not be aware, both Mike and I teach and have a pretty storied history in the classroom. So one of the classes that I've taught for a couple of years has been look at me doing all of this multitasking. Is I teach a class at Drexel called Writing for Comic Books. And one of the things that people are always surprised to find out is that the class is a little less about scripting, because most of my students are already screenwriters and things like that. But it's more about the relationship between the writer and the artist, or the writer and the creative team. And one of the fallacies that a lot of people think is, oh, well, I wrote a movie script, I could write comics, right, Mike?
Yeah, right.
And you find out quickly it's not exactly the same language, but it's real close, but it's not, it's like almost apples and oranges to a degree. So maybe, Mike, can you talk a little bit about that hang up some people have? And we already have a question. Maybe this is a good place
okay.
to start.
Well, what's the question?
Okay. Our good buddy JRD, J. Robert Deans, asks, guys, what's the difference between writing Marvel method and standard scripting?
Well, I think it's been going on so long now, since the 60s, and with the Marvel method. And that really developed out of the fact that you literally had a handful of people in the world who were qualified enough to be able, as storytellers, to be able to take a description of a loose plot by Stan, and then go actually make a comic book, make the story, and put all the notes in it. And you had that group of guys like Kirby and Ditko, Buscema, Romita. They could take something like that, but that's actually not something that most cartoonists at that time were capable of doing, nor did they actually want to do it. One of the things that happened with a lot of the older guys is they felt like, well, wait a minute, if I'm doing my job and I'm doing Stan's job, I want to get half of what Stan's getting paid. Right. So I think it really depends upon your gifts as a storyteller. Some people are really good at just being able to, like Kirby is probably the greatest example. You could just say, tell me a story about an old witch in a well. He'd go home and,
bang it out.
Just do it. Right?
Yeah.
Another artist would need the script with the caption and the dialogue. Then they could take that and then they could give you a fantastic performance. And so I don't think that there's one version that's better or worse. I think it really just depends upon the strengths and the desires of the individual artists. I prefer the plot to the full script. But again, you could get a really crappy plot, or you could get really good full script. So,
can you break that down a little bit? What does a plot sound like?
A plot would be pages 17 to 21. Peter Parker realizes that the spider robot is hunting for him and is climbing up the side of the building, and he has to escape J. Jonah Jameson's office before it crashes through the window and reveals that it's Spider-Man, that he's Spider-Man because it's keyed to his DNA.
Yeah.
Right. But just as he tries to leave the office, Robbie Robertson comes up, and then Betty Brant, and each person has something to do to delay him. And then at the end of the last page, the robot breaks through the wall and attacks him. All right. So now you take that and you would decide how many pages that is.
Right.
What it is that Betty Brant is doing, what it is that Robbie Robertson is doing, where J.D. Jonah Jameson is, how to break. Is the last panel a splash page? Is it a half splash page? Or like when I get the scripts for the 2 strips I do every week, it tells you what happened in every strip, what every panel, right? With the dialogue, the narration, Everything is right there. The description and what everybody is saying, right? I think for comic strips, it works really well to do that because it's a very much more restricted format.
Yeah.
I think for comic books, specifically superhero comic books, I think the plot works great because then you can lean on the creative juices of the artist to come up with a lot of cool visual stuff and then script to that. And ideally, the writer, if they're a good writer, should write to the strength of the particular artist, right?
Mm-hmm.
Just like if the artist is good, they should be aware of what is the strength of the writer. Is it dialogue? Is it witty dialogue? Is it coming up with interesting scenarios? And so you get that marrying of the two people's talents, you know.
Mm-hmm.
One, you know, you lean on one or you take from one or you springboard off the other. And I think that was Stan Lee's gift, is that he realized that he had these guys who were great storytellers,
mm-hmm.
and he could lean on that. And then just like jazz, he could react to what they did. You know, sometimes it works. Sometimes you might ask somebody to make a change, or what if this happened, or whatever. But I think in the case of the guys, especially the guys who are working at Marvel and that method, that's why those comics are so much more, I think, interesting and dynamic than a lot of the stuff at DC at the same time. Right? It was later on that DC tried to sort of catch up to doing stuff like that.
Mm-hmm. And just to bookend the question, and standard scripting would be in your example, Mike, rather than having that very loose plot that goes through the whole book, it would be page 1, 6 panels, panel 1. We see Spider-Man stuck in J. Jonah Jameson's office looking for a way out. Then there's dialogue. Spidey says, "Oh man, I can't find my keys." Whatever. I'm just going with that. Panel 2.
These are the worst photos I've ever seen, Parker. You expect me to pay for this?
Right.
I'll never be able to get him to pay me for Aunt May's heart pills.
So the standard script is that basically the writer is now describing all of the relevant action leading us through page by page, panel by panel. And sometimes there's a lot of room for jazz playing, like Mike said, or interpretation. I say a lot to my students that if the writer doesn't say it, then it's probably not important, right? So like if the writer specifically says there is a dying Boston fern on JJJ's desk, like you got to draw that because it's in the script. But if, you know, I know Kirkman is good for in his scripts writing, like, I don't know, just make something up. Like that'll actually be written in the script for the artist. Like, I don't know what's hanging on the wall. I don't care. Just put something there.
Yeah. Right. Well, there's like, also there, as we'll see tonight as we go through, there's set up and payoff, just like a joke. You set up a joke and then you have a payoff. You have to set things up. Mm-hmm. That later on pay off. If you don't set something up well in the beginning, maybe some element in the background that later on you're going to use, you can't just suddenly. It's like if you're watching a movie and then at the end scene, the killer is revealed to be this person that nobody has ever seen at all in the movie. What? A killer pigeon escaped from a lab.
Jonathan Winters.
Right. You know, if that happens, then people go like, "What the?" I've been like going all the way through, thinking you've been leading me up to think that something's going to happen. Right. So it's a lot of coordination to do this kind of stuff. You know. Yeah. And that's why the layout part, as we will see tonight, is really. That's the most important part. Drawing is great, but if the layout and the storytelling isn't really good, then the comic book will be nice looking, but it won't be really successful as a narrative, right? Mm-hmm. And this is regardless of style, whether you're drawing, you know, Beetle Bailey or you're drawing Conan or whatever. I mean, this formal quality, these formal elements of laying out your story are universal to any kind of story that you're telling in comics. The only difference, really, as far as I look at it now, is you have short form narrative, which is like a comic strip, because you have the most restrictive amount of space.
What?
The comic book,
which
is middle, like the American comic, and then a graphic novel, which you get the whole enchilada, right? Beginning, middle, and end, right?
Yeah.
So, and how you pace that is dependent upon each particular format.
So here's a question about what JRD asked. Do you see people really still doing plot style scripts at this point in the art form? As people talk about the Marvel method, like a lot of people are still writing like that. What are your thoughts on that? Because it's basically standard at this point, right?
Yeah, I think it's pretty standard. I mean, I know the guys like when you're writing something like Watchmen or Chris Claremont, those guys would give you a big thing. When I worked on the Magnus stuff with Jim Shooter, even though it was kind of like half plot, he would give you all these extra details and things about certain things, and then you can kind of incorporate that. I don't know now, because I'm mostly working on comic strips.
Yeah.
But I will show you the last couple comic book jobs I got. It's basically a plot.
Yeah.
Even though DC is initially was full script and Marvel was the plot, it's pretty much, I think most comics are plot and then the writing is done afterwards. I'm sure there's an exception based upon the preferences of whoever is doing what. I don't think that there's any rule anymore.
Yeah.
And
I know that's messed some people up, because even teaching, it's like, well, is this right? Is this right? And I say, there's parts where I say, yeah, the structure is correct, but don't get so hung up on how it looks. As long as the artist understands what you're trying to communicate, that's the most important part of it.
Right. Now, I think what would happen when I was working regularly doing stuff is you would do your layout, then the layouts would be sent to the writer. So while you are finishing your pencils, the writer would be scripting it. And then you would go initially, like when I first started, then you would send in the pencils, they would go off and be lettered, and then they would come back to you or go to ink, or they would go to the inker, right? Now, because of email, I can do my layouts, send my layout via email right to the writer. He can write that. That then can go to the letterer, who has the template, can letter it right over the, and then it's all combined later in the office. So that's technology has really changed that, probably for the better, because that way, if I go, and it's happened a few times on the strips where Francesco had overwritten a little dialogue for the Sunday, and the Sundays are very restrictive as far as the height and everything.
Right. It's tight.
Right. So I would say, can you rewrite that and knock it down a little bit? Because in order for me to fit stuff on, right? So again, I think technology, now allows us to say, hey, look, I laid this out and I put in all the dialogue. Look, we need a little bit more room. Can you go back in and
this leads into a question from the room. One of our YouTube watchers, Eternity Forever, says, how do you keep the verbose writing from overtaking your art? So would you say the answer to that would be more about having a good communication with the writer, or also you're going to have to make some adjustments in your art also, right?
I think it's both. Now, Roy Crane was a great adventure strip, one of the best guys ever, would say that what you do is you rewrite. You rewrite your writing and try to get it as nimble and as thin as to the point as possible. That's very hard sometimes for people. Some people fall in love with words, right? They fall in love with literature, and comic books is a hybrid.
Yeah.
So, like you can do an autobiograph comic, and it can just be blah blah blah. You know, lots of whoa, like that. Just, you know,
making sure you're awake there. Yeah.
Right. But I don't think that that's going to be successful for an issue of Spider-Man.
Yeah.
Right. Now, if you're doing your autobio comic and there's lots of narration, and then it's your point of your story and the type of story that you're trying to tell is different, right? And so it may work for you to do something like that. But I think, you know, if you're buying an issue of the Hulk or you're reading Beetle Bailey, you don't want to read a bunch of, you know, a bunch of dialogue. I think, you know, if you really want to write, you should write a book.
That's,
you know, if you really want to write and you love writing, and there's nothing wrong with that, you should really write a book, right? Because you got to pare everything down for comics. I mean, even with art, you've got to pare stuff down. You've got to. It's always this process of condensing. You know?
Now, did you ever hear in your time in the business any editors ever make any hard and fast rules, like there's only supposed to be X amount of characters in a word balloon, or only X amount of lines in a word balloon before you need to break it into a beat and do another balloon? Did you ever hear any kind of rules like that? Or is it
I never heard anything like that about the writing on my end.
Yeah.
What I would always heard from the beginning was that you, in general, would leave 1/3 of each balloon as an area that could have copy in it. Now, sometimes, you know, the guy's just firing the gun and there's not going to be a big balloon, right? But in general, if there's a scene where, you know, the Avengers are in their mansion, or, you know, the bad guy is, you know, monologuing to the good guy about what he's going to do and how he's going to take over the world, you got to leave room. You've got to leave room. And I think what happens with the younger artists is they're not used to that, and they think, like, I'm going to make this exciting, and they get so close that basically you would be covering up everything, right?
Yeah.
So that's also why I say it's important for writers, aspiring writers, to thumbnail stuff, because you get to actually write out what I do is I always have the kids write out their script. Even if your lettering is not, you know, like the best, you know, Todd Klein level lettering.
Right.
If you actually write it out, you actually get an idea of actually how it feels to read it, the rhythm of you reading it, and how much space that takes up on the page. If you've got this big monologue, but then you're trying to show the world blowing up, that's not gonna really work very well.
Yeah.
I've also dealt with guys, writers who adapted something, like when I worked on the Weave World book, which is a Clive Barker book. He had a friend of his adapt the book into comics. Again, that's a very heavy editing process to go from, you know, a book that's that thick, right, down to a comic. You can have 4 issues that's that thick.
Yeah.
And you're going to have, you know, all this stuff in there, you know?
And this is kind of going along the line of what we're talking about. A YouTube user 036 Whispered says, any good pointers on outlining as part of writing? And I think what we're talking about lays right into that, just knowing going in that verbosity isn't really celebrated in this art form. Right, it's kind of like things need to be kind of like boiled down to a good fine roux that keeps the story going. I mean, there's points I think where you can make it like a character detail, like, well, this guy talks a lot or something like that. But if you're just like
read the best it's like, how do you learn to make comics? You read the best comics. How do you learn to make film? You watch the best film, and then you try to make a film, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's totally different to be a critic of film or a fan of film, and then actually be involved in the crazy circus of actually being like a lion tamer and trying to get everybody to get your vision
Mm-hmm.
on the screen, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's the same thing with comics. If you want to write detective comics, then read the best detective comic. If you want to read superhero comics, read the best superhero comics, and then look at it with a critical eye to judge the formal qualities of how the people are putting it together. Right?
I like that. You gave me the shivers, Mike. That was nice. Scott Kurtz, you know Scott Kurtz, did a little selfless name dropping in the chat. Jim Davis told Scott Kurtz that every Garfield strip is under 25 words. I told him he was crazy. Wow. And I would wonder, I would hazard to ask Scott, like, did Jim say why? Like, why is that such a hard, fast rule with the strip? Is it to keep
25 words? I gotta golf. See ya.
Like, does it keep it breezy? Like, is it kind of like an art to text ratio?
I think so.
Right.
Go to Comics Kingdom now, and just go across all the strips and look at the amount of writing on a comic strip. Again, the comic strip is the most universal form of comics because people read them all over the world, every language, every culture. Everybody reads Peanuts and Garfield and Blondie.
Yeah.
All right. And look how much writing. Look what the writing does. Look at what the drawing does. Right. That gives you, an idea. And again, part of this is you just have to do enough. It's like somebody asks you, well, how do I draw a person? You draw a person 5,000 times. That's how you learn how to draw a person. You don't learn how to draw a person by drawing them 4 times or even 20 times. You're a little bit better on the 20th time than you were on the 4th time. But literally, you have to draw things hundreds of times. So it's the same thing with writing. You'd have to, your 4th comic should be written better than your 1st comic. Your 20th comic should be better than your 4th comic. Part of it is that, like, the amateur always asks the professional, how do I do this? What are the shortcuts? The answer is there are no shortcuts. The shortcut is your ass in the chair working. I
tattooed that on my stomach.
And that's the reality. Right?
Yeah.
People want to think that, like, there's 5 little things that you will do, and all of a sudden, bing. But no, it doesn't really work that way.
There's a couple more things, and then we should get into some graphics. Edward Murr, who's watching on Facebook, says, do you consider graphic design as an element of comic book storytelling?
Yep.
It's a good question.
Well, I mean, design is design, right? So anytime you have a composition, which is an arrangement of elements, it's a design.
Yeah.
Right. So you have a design, as you will see as we get into it here. You have design of each panel, but you have the design of the whole page, and then how the designs of the pages relate to each other. Right. So it's all design.
I feel like design is such a hidden element of comic book making that people don't really know that it's a part of the pie. It's a big piece of the pie.
Yeah. People sometimes look at, when you say design, you mean, like making a logo? Right. They don't think about it as what we're talking about is the compositional design, and the design of the narrative. Much like you have in a film, a director is also a designer and then works with designers, cinematographer, lighter, set designer, art director, works with all those people to get that set, that feeling that period that they want up on the screen. So each department works with the other in the way that it is needed to get that vision on screen. We as comic artists or cartoonists, we combine all those, all those jobs when we're drawing a comic book.
So I think there's one more thing.
Okay.
No, I think we're good. Why don't we get into, like, I think the graphic design part is a great place to start talking about some of the hidden language of page making.
Right. Well, here, let me get my tablet all fired up.
Cool.
And then we can start out with some real basic stuff to kind of give people an overview. And we'll.
And Mike, while you're getting ready, I'll just talk to the room real fast. Thanks everybody for joining us tonight. This is a special pencil to pencil episode where Mike and I are enacting comic book martial law. That's right. It's the comic art boot camp tonight, where we're talking about creating stories from script to the page layout. So if you have any questions, feel free to load them up. As always, I am controlling the flow of this conversation. So if your question doesn't make sense yet,
you're controlling my flow.
If your question is great, but it's not really fitting into what we're talking about, I'll put it in my pocket for later. So don't get upset.
But it might get moist and kind of.
All right, can I bring this on now?
You can bring it on now, yeah. Okay. So just a very basic primer. I know, most of you might know this, but some of you don't. The idea always, again, going back to the very basic formal qualities of visual storytelling for comic books here. So I got a basic grid, and this is usually the grid I print out and I give to my students to help them break down their story.
Can you green button that, Mike, so we can see more of that on the screen? There you go.
Okay, awesome. So we basically read from, left to right, down, boom, 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 right? That's how we read in the West. In Japan, it's the same thing. It's just reversed. And so you always have to be aware that you're following not only the drawing, but also people tend to follow the balloons. The balloons tend to lead you along. So you overall want to have this flow. Really helps going this way in designing your page and the elements, the compositions in your page to help you move along, especially things like superheroes, because they're very kinetic, they're very dynamic, and you want to keep that feeling of dynamics. Maybe on something that might be more less dynamic, less superheroic, you don't have to push it as hard. But if you look at people, especially like Kirby, he pushed this. There was always something in his compositions that led you from one panel to the other. Again, you could just simply use the position of your word balloons to do it, but it also helps to have elements of design, of the background, things like that to help lead your eye.
Before you jump off of that, Mike, when you talked about creating your story elements inside this Z formation, something that a lot of people may miss is that even the direction that characters are facing on the page could break or help the eye flow from in and out of the panel down to the next.
Exactly. So the other real basic thing to take into account is that your shot choice is one of the primary ways that you build your story. Okay. And this is, from film or comics. This also relates to illustration. But you basically have 6 types of shots. You have an establishing shot, like you see at the top there with the guy on top of the rock. So that's sort of like a meta shot, what I call like you see the world, the person in the world, elements of the world. You kind of know where you are. Then you have the other type of establishing shot, which is the house next to it, which goes, this house, this bar, this room, this launching pad, and so it's identifies where things are happening, right? And it's very important to always, the default as a storyteller is to always let the reader know where they are. So you're always reestablishing. The next one below that is the medium establishing shot, which again is inside the place, but you see characters and elements and the relationship between them. If you watch a sporting event, and actually most action movies are all medium shots, because you get to see Jackie Chan climb up the wall. You see Jackie Chan fighting 10 guys, right? If you're in close, like the next 3 shots, well, you can't see Jackie Chan doing all of his great gymnastics and kicking everybody's butt, right? So the shot you choose is always in service of what you need to show. The hardest thing for young artists to learn is that the last 3 shots are not the most exciting shots to show. Excitement is also clarity and in context. So I always say, when I would teach my storyboarding class, if all music, every instrument was playing at the same tempo and the same loudness, you wouldn't be able to hear anything. Right? Yeah. And I think because people sort of got used to watching videos and things like that, we have this quick cutting, that aspect of it seemed exciting, because you had no shot in a video lasts more than 1, 2, maybe 3 seconds. So you just have this visual punch created by the rhythm of the cutting with the music. But tell me 5 videos that you remember that told a story. You can't, right? Because the idea is not to really tell a story. The idea is to have something visually interesting to go along with the music, right? Now, I saw an old Huey Lewis video a couple weeks ago for the song "Happy to Be Stuck with You," right? And so in the beginning, he breaks up with a girl, then he goes to the beach and he meets another girl, and at the end, he leaves with the girl. All right, that kind of video was not really sort of typical after a little while.
Right, after a certain period of time.
Right. Yeah. So now the medium shot is the actor's shot. That's where you need to show somebody's face. You need to show somebody's reaction. You need to see somebody being mad, happy, I'm going to rule the world, or I love you, or I hate you. That's the medium shot, right? And even the medium close-up. And in Hollywood, that's the payday right there for the actor. That's where Al Pacino or Jack Nicholson or any great actor, you get to see them act in those 2 shots. The last shot is the extreme close-up is the shot that you use the least, mostly in things like horror movies or whatever, or somebody's finger pushing a button or something. So that, and learning the combination of where you put the camera, which is you're always pointing the camera at the story, and the combination of shots, that is the guts of storytelling.
Yeah.
Right? This is what makes Spielberg, or Hitchcock, or Sidney Lumet. Everybody's making establishing shots. Everybody's using medium shots. Everybody's, we all are using the same tools, right? But how you combine them and why you combine them and where you combine them, what is the reason that you combine them, is storytelling. And the bottom line is, you are in every decision is in service of telling the story, and if it doesn't serve to tell the story, it's a bad shot.
And even if you're not a fan of film or cinema or any of this stuff, but you're a student of comics, go watch some classic movies and see how the shots are set up. You'll learn so much about storytelling just by looking at it from that way. Like the first Jurassic Park movie, you know, is classic for what it's worth, but there's really spectacular shots in there. I think it's like the first shot where Grant and Ellie get out of the Jeep and you see the big brachiosaur, whatever the thing is, and the scale of that between them in the bottom corner, like all that stuff is done on purpose.
Right.
You know, for scope and scale and storytelling.
Right. And you point out the other, like the next really important rule is that everything is done on purpose. There is nothing that is done by accident. Accident is I want some spritz in the sky and I take my toothbrush and put ink on it and go, and then that's an accident. Right? But to construct a narrative that people are going to be involved in, that is not accidental. You know, a guy like Hitchcock storyboarded his own films, so much so that he reportedly didn't even have to look through the lens of the camera, because he said, "This is my storyboard." Everybody else came over and said, "Okay, this is what Hitchcock wants." That's what they did. So, so now that we've done those two basic primers, I will show you a page from a comic I did a couple years ago where DC was doing these digital online comics. And so this is written by Phil Hester, my buddy Phil. And so you can go through the first page and you can see here what they talk. This gives me what happens on the first page, right? And the interesting thing about this is that they had to be formatted so you got each thing could be broken apart. Like you can see, so you had the little formatting there. So you go exterior Gotham Knight. We were looking up between the darkened branches of trees in Central Park, like locale as Robinson Park. In a hazy smog above the city, we see the distinctive image of the blazing bat symbol, a voice from off panel, a small sliver of a panel, right? So then you've got the beat cop. Come on, guys, you know the drill. And then we go wider on a street outside the park. Several patrol cars, police vans are parked there, blocking the trickle of late-night traffic. A young African-American female plainclothes CSI detective and her assistant, a Korean male of 24 carrying their gear, are walking towards the park when they are headed off by a grizzled beat cop, a slightly overweight, mustachioed Hispanic guy of 48. All right. Then you go to the next panel, the benevolent but resolute beat cop holding hands up in front of his chest in a sort of mock surrender step back gesture, weary smile. And then the fourth is the beat cop starting to string a crime scene tape in front of the park with the help of the assistant. Okay, so you can see I got the bat signal. I got the building. I kind of got I took the trees out because I felt that the trees would be a little bit confusing as far as compressing the space. All right, so then here is the cop. There's the girl, or the female, and the male. And there he goes, hey, you know, and so I tying that together. Now I had to decide to use these long panels. Just because the necessity of, if I drawn 4 squares, I wouldn't be able to get as much space. And I had to be aware of the fact that the word balloons were going to be in here. So I actually roughed them in. You don't see that in here, but I did.
Mike, and this is a great thing. So your first panel, your establishing shot, just for the sake of height, right? Like you want the bat signals in the sky, so you want to put the viewer looking up at it.
Right.
So it necessitates to have a vertical panel.
Right.
Right.
Okay. And again, right, perfect point, because this shot dictates an upshot.
Yeah.
If I'm going to show the sky, it's an upshot.
Yeah.
Right. And if I let's see here, if I were to crop that, if I crop that from here, then you don't see anything. You don't get in a sense of scale. And again, I like a nice dynamic sense of scale, even though it's a very small space, right? Yeah. And because with this job, space is was always an issue.
Yeah.
I was very aware of the dynamics involved. Hands up, and then here you see the hand stretching the tape. So I got to get the crime scene in there. You get the two characters, and then you get to see the two characters, the cop, two cops, the CSI and the other cop talking to each other.
Yeah.
I'm really having to compress space. So I'm thinking foreground, middle ground, background. What can I put in the foreground in this meta shot? I see the police cars and the cops. And so I'm having to sort of really compress and edit the space here, right? I can see the edge of the park, the wall, the trees. I see the name of the building, or the name Robinson Park. Put the caution tape right there. You can see they're stretching it out. Then you can see, again, the police vans and stuff. I'm very pressed for space, but I still have enough. But it's how I use my space, right? So I tend to, again, also think of foreground, middle ground, background. Can I put something in the foreground that's important, like the caution tape? And then just a little bit of a brick wall, the name of the park, and a stop sign might be all I get. All the room I get, right? And then, of course, the big meta panel, which is Batman looking at this entombed figure of Superman with Commissioner Gordon, right? That's the metal panel. That's the cool, cool panel. But you build up to that. Right.
One thing before you kick off of this, Mike, there's a lot of really interesting elements that makes this work, and a lot of them are kind of mechanical. One of the things is that Phil's script is very specific in what he's asking to see on the page, right? And there's these really great cues where he's giving you some character notes for the actors on the page. You know, this character's African American, the other guy is Korean, around this age. All that stuff is really helpful. So you're not basically spending more time trying to design a bunch of things and hoping that they work. The second thing is that Phil's dialogue is breezy enough because he knows that you don't have a lot of space to play with on this page. So he's not like dumping a lot of word vomit on top of this that you got to then figure out how to place.
Right. And then the other thing I have to say that I do is like when I'm thinking of always of perspective. This is something I got actually from Hitchcock, looking at his films. So when he would go from scene to scene, he would have one scene where the perspective went away this way. Then the next thing, he would have the perspective go reverse, and then the verse, and then verse. So I'm thinking of trying to create space, and then I sort of have a little bit of a neutral when they're both talking to each other, right? But I'm always thinking of space and going away, perspective leading your eye away. It tends to make things dynamic, and then thinking of grouping things like this. He's a group, they're a group, that's a group. He's a group, that's a group.
And this is a perfect example of the Z, right? You're basically the bat signal being up at the top left pushes your eye up and then into panel 2. Right. It's perfect. that's a perfect example of the Z at work.
Right. And then what I do also when I'm figuring all this out, I'm figuring out my perspective,
Yeah.
in my layout. I'm thinking of shape, right? Eye direction and shape. Then it also tells me, what do I need to do? Oh, I need to go get reference for a police van. I need to get reference for a police car, right? Now I can make up these buildings, things like that now, but other people may not be able to make up the building. So you might need to go and look at references of buildings. You might need to go and, I mean, I could Greek in a pretty good police car because I've drawn a zillion police cars by now, but it always helps you, even if you're drawing something simple. Simple is the design process. So you should look at the real thing and then design it. And again, there's two guys that are really good, I think, for doing this type of storytelling. One is Joe Kubert, who's one of the best guys ever. And I probably learned between him and Gil Kane, I probably learned more about laying out comics, especially Kubert, as we will see. I'll show some examples. And then you have your payoff, right? So it's like bing, 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 boom. Now you have your big payoff. But I'm also thinking of this shape, and I'm thinking of where I want their eyes to read, right? So I wanted to put Gordon on the same level. So you kind of go right across, even though, you know, you kind of cheat the perspective a little bit and you push that back. This is what I call like a flat perspective, right? Where I'm not really drawing orthogonal lines leading to a vanishing point. I'm kind of cheating it a little bit. And I'm making the city flat and everything, just so I can get this layer of the crater, the layer of the trees, and the layer of the city, just so it reads very clearly.
And Superman's foot is taking you right out of the panel.
Right.
Following the Z.
Right. And then this little thing leads you to the next page.
Yeah.
Now, I heard that Joe Kubert used to lay out 2 pages at a time. So what he would do is have a page here and a page here, and he would relate one page to the other, right? Some guys do that. Some guys don't do that. I would probably say I learned, again, from studying his work, from reading his comics, because I never had a class on, you know, I never took a cartooning class, or none of that was ever available. So I learned to do this stuff through like formal observation and dissecting what these guys did. Long before I ever had Eisner's book or anything like that. And there's a lot of great books out there. There's Will Eisner's book. There's Understanding Comics, which get into this kind of stuff. But I think for superhero comics and really dynamic narratives, nobody ever beat Joe Kubert for laying out a comic. Nobody. So there's those two as an example, and your shot choice. Here's just a fun thing. I found these. This is an old Batman page. And I don't know what happened in this panel here, but again, I'm thinking, right? Lead your eye around.
That's really lyrical. Yeah, look at them.
And the shape, you know, this if I just Dutch that angle a little bit, it pushes it down, right? And these buildings, again, as a framing device, and a little bit of perspective, just a little bit of perspective in there. This angle, again, framing device. Like I might have eventually, like maybe I would move this over so we would see his head, right? Because you want to see the ears against.
You need the ears, yeah.
Yeah, you want to see the ears against that. But again, that's also an important point of doing a layout, because you get to say, okay, I'm going to change. I see it. No, I'm not so sure if I like it. I'm going to change it around a little bit in here.
Oh, hey, Mike, before you get into this, Eternitine had a good question that maybe we can answer here or from the first page. How do you know when to add a background in a panel and how much texture to add to it?
Again, that depends. Okay, so here's a group shot. This is from the Convergence thing, right? So they're on the top of the Daily Planet, which is really hard to find the reference for the top of the Daily Planet.
Can you
But
can you green button that so we can see that? Yeah.
So one of the things that required, this is of course the shot where you see all the heroes and everybody standing and blah 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 blah. blah. Right.
Yeah.
But then I'm thinking, okay, so they're on top of the Daily Planet. Well, you're going to have that little elevator thing probably in the pedestal that it's on or whatever. And I was thinking, well, this makes an interesting shape.
Mm-hmm.
That also then focuses your eye for the people's faces, right? And you've got this perspective. So you get a little dynamic of the perspective, and you got a couple buildings back there. So the point here is I'm not going to try to overpower the characters with a bunch of backgrounds. The background is a way of supporting the design of the characters. Even just here, this building is bigger, this building is smaller, pushes the space, and it gives you this nice interval between Captain Marvel and Wonder Woman. And then this is the final penciled version. So you see, I put in a little bit more, but I just wanted the shape, and you want to be able to see each character, and you want to be able to be far enough back so that they're posing. And then the last shot was Wonder Woman, raising her sword. So I decided to overlap her panel because I just thought it sort of made it more interesting. And so there's everything in this background is trying to lead your eye in perspective. Yeah. I think the issue is if you can kind of almost go too detailed and then you pull your eye away from the characters.
Right. So it's almost like that would be a violation of noodling too much.
Right. Here's another example. Let me see if I can pull up that script. I pulled up some scripts here. So this is... So this is Convergence.
You want me to pull the screen while you figure that out?
Yeah,
you got to get your stuff together. So while Mike is getting his windows in order, this will be a great time to give a shout out to our sponsor, Clip Studio Paint. That's right. Pencil to Pencil is brought to you every Wednesday and Saturday by Clip Studio Paint. Yes, that Clip Studio Paint. Yes, the one that you use in your studio every day. I believe that it's becoming quickly the biggest art program in a lot of cartoonists' tool belt. So if you're not on that, get on that bus. Also, our good buddies at Tomorrow's Publishing. So I think we're in good hands, Mike Manley, with our sponsors. So thank you all for your support of those people.
Okay, here, let me close that. Let me go over here. I'm putting so much stuff together.
I love it. The kiddies are on high alert tonight. They're staying real close to Dad. And if anybody has any more design questions or questions along this segment of our podcast, please ask away. It's great to see all of these viewers signing in, so thanks for your continued support. If you're watching on Facebook, it would be great if you could go over to our YouTube channel and subscribe, and vice versa for our YouTubers. We have a really heavy community on Facebook. And all of our videos, since we started doing the live podcasts, are available on our Facebook page. Soon, when I get some free time, Mike, I'm going to put the rest of these on YouTube and update our iTunes audio podcast also. Yeah, I need an assistant just for this.
Okay, so I got some more here.
All right. Yeah, when you're ready to share it, I'll put it up.
Okay. So here we go. So this is again from Convergence. So I've got page 16 here, which is cut to the rooftop of the headquarters, bit of a low angle shot so we can look up at the vast dome overhead as the members of the JLA have gathered there and are looking into the sky. Ice, Martian Manhunter, Beetle just arriving. The dome is starting to dissolve, each geometric shape dissipating individually. Captain Adam says remarks on it. Note that we see a bit of the Daily Planet building in the distance. Moving closer on panel 2. See Captain Adam in the foreground. So this is actually somewhere between a plot and a full script.
Yeah, it's like a hybrid.
Because as I worked on this, they were constantly changing everything to the very end. I mean, the amount of time between the first issue and the second issue was months because they were constantly noodling on what they were doing. He says, we have no idea what's happening or what this means. Presumably, there will be reference in this eventually. So all the scenes of the dome are dropping are at least similar. So see, even here, they don't know exactly what was happening, right? Reaction shot of the Beetle was panel 3. Martian Manhunter takes a step closer to the Beetle, and then we concentrate on Martian Manhunter. His hands in the foreground is starting to turn invisible. Even the normally stoic Martian Manhunter is surprised and sports a small smile. So, so that was the, and there's the panel. I'm trying to find where did my layout go. Here's the layout. They're looking there. There's where you see the Daily Planet. Again, I'm trying to leave a lot of room for dialogue because I don't know what they're saying, but I knew that there would be lots of blah 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 blah. This is what's going on. A lot of blah blah blah. Right. So here's the layout. Here's the finish. They had and again, I'm looking at this case. I was also looking at what other artists had done, which is always difficult because you got 50 artists working on this thing, and one guy's doing one thing on Monday, and then you don't see it till Friday, and there was a lot. Marie did a great job of trying to coordinate all this stuff. Again, I'm trying to put a little perspective in there, kind of a little bit of a Dutch angle, just to make it a little bit more dynamic. And so you see the thing, the dome thing.
I forgot about the dome thing. Yeah.
Right. So then it's disappeared. And then Martian Manhunter, and then he's raw and Martian Manhunter. So you can see it's very open. But when I do my layout, I'm trying to figure everything out so that basically when I get to the drawing part, all I have to do is render. All I have to do is draw.
Yeah.
Right. And I'm trying to leave the writer because I know with something like this, there's going to be a lot of dialogue. Yeah. Right. And so that's what you get when you get a plot. Right. Yeah. You get a lot of dialogue. Right.
One thing I was going to add, and I know there's a little bit of dialogue, but not really in that script sample. But you could see in like the standard scripts, there was actually space laid out for the dialogue, so you could even visually drop that in. Like I know you do that with your daily strips, that you drop in the dialogue while you're laying out the strips, just to keep you on the right track with how much space you need for things, right?
Right.
So something like this is just another added issue, another thing you have to solve.
Right. So I needed to see close enough to see his expression, and like he's looking at his hands, and then the last pose is a strong pose of him. My powers are returning. Right. I could have pulled out further, but I sort of felt like if I had done that, it wouldn't be quite as dynamic because you want to be able to see him. One of the other issues you have whenever you have a book that has a lot of characters in it is you have to deal with how do you arrange them? How do you arrange 7 people talking to each other? And that's a lot of work. You have to, again, choose your angle very carefully. Now let's see if I can pull up this one. So here's page 2. And let's see if I have the page 2 on here. There's the page. So here's the layout, right? So this page, we have the same exact layout as page 1. You want to play up the duality of the two heroes. This is a close-up of Blue Beetle's eyes. His demeanor serious. A voice off asks him, "Are you sure?" Oh, this is page 4. That's not right.
That's not it. Okay.
Yeah. Well, we'll jump to this.
Okay.
This one. Well, I'll go back to this. So anyway, so in this one, he's talking to Wonder Woman, right? And they're in front of their headquarters. And again, there's going to be a lot of dialogue, so I want to put some background in here. You know, this is in Washington where they have all the different
what are those? Yeah, the trees.
No, not the trees. The places, where you have the people from the other countries. The
UN.
Yeah, not the UN, but each country's individual, where they have all their diplomats.
Oh, gotcha.
You know, right. And then, you know, something simple like an element that also frames them, gets a little bit of perspective. You know, you see the other characters. And this is very difficult to draw somebody on the street.
JRD says embassy.
Embassy, right, exactly. Somebody on the street talking and pointing to the characters on top of the roof. Right? So you got to do an upshot. Or you're going to do a downshot of the people on the roof, but then you couldn't see the Blue Beetle's face.
Right.
And so you have this very stoic Wonder Woman, pull away shot, close on her, close on him, thinking of the Kubert thing of putting the camera in a place that you wouldn't normally be. Can add some sort of excitement, because what you don't want is 5 shots in a row of 2 people just standing, because that's boring.
Yeah, the talking heads, right.
But again, you know, this was a difficult shot, and then you need to be able to see the silhouettes of these characters enough to know that, oh, that's, you know, Martian Manhunter or whoever. So again, my charge is to make this interesting, but also leave enough room for the writer to go back in and put in whatever all this drama is going to be, right? And then the angle that you're using must support the story point. So I can't just do a cool shot of Blue Beetle because I just want to do a cool shot of Blue Beetle if I also must get the embassy in and the people, the characters in the embassy, right? And then you can see here's the final pencil, right?
Well,
and I penciled
the green button that. I love it.
I did this. So I did this very tightly because I wasn't sure. I was hoping I was going to be able to ink it, but in the end, I think Joe Rubenstein inked some of it. So again, you know, I probably looked at like the flag of Portugal or something. I actually looked at real embassies, right? So you know, that's and just like even like this, her sword is like very difficult. It's very ornate. So
that's enough. Oh, you know what? Can you go back to your layout for that? I had some questions about your final. So like even in that one shot right there with Beetle, it seems like that went across the whole section of the page, but you kind of made it an inset in the finish. Is that right?
Oh, this?
Panel 3. where you see like the close up of Beetle's eyes,
Oh, right. Yeah.
and
Yeah.
then in the final pencils that turned into an inset. Was there a choice you made for that? Just or was
Well,
it?
I decided to make it an inset because it
Mhm,
just looked
mhm.
him being tight on him and just focusing on eyes made him look more serious.
Yeah,
And then it, again, leaving at least a third, or in this case, a half, where he could say something, right?
yeah, yeah, yeah,
And so
yeah.
since I knew this was going to be scripted later, I was trying to again give Ron a lot of room to be able to put in his dialogue without covering up anything that was important. So like these trees are figured out, and the design was figured out. A nice composition, basically this A to sort of
Mhm.
surround them,
Yeah.
and then the little shadows to lead your eye up here. But again, that could have I'd have to pull up the page, but that could have been all filled with dialogue,
Right.
right? So when you're the thing that artists in the beginning should get used to doing is, if you have a script, write in. I always write in the dialogue when I'm doing the Phantom or Judge Parker. I always write in the dialogue, or in the case of Judge Parker, since I do it all digital, I actually take the script, cut the words, paste it down, then I know
Mhm.
exactly what I have.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Um, and if you don't have a script, draw in a couple of balloons. It would be better
Mhm.
to have extra room than not to have enough room and then have the balloon go like,
Mhm.
right, touching somebody. It would be better to have the balloon and then also have a little white space around the lettering. Again, it's all these little aesthetic things
Yeah.
that make it easy for you to read. One of the things that hurts almost every cartoonist in the beginning is their lettering is really shitty. And if your lettering is really shitty, people
Mhm.
get tired. They will not read your story. They
Yeah.
will look at the art, but they will stop reading. If the
Yeah.
lettering is funky, they will just not read. You know.
Mhm.
Um, so let's see
That's
if we have any questions. I'll stop sharing for right now. I'll ask them because I have some more stuff. So do we have?
uh, well, there's one that I kind of answered in the room, but if you want to talk about it from a different angle, Daniel Rosa, hey Daniel, watching on YouTube, says, I was curious how the editor is involved. Is it like a daily check-in or review before pencils? And I told him quickly in mainly in comics from the day to day, it's kind of like cat wrangling, making sure the creative team is moving forward and hitting deadlines and checkups. But maybe you can give a little bit more information on your relationships with a comic book editor, Mike.
It really varies.
Yeah.
Marie was very good because she was on top of just when I was getting
Mhm.
this stuff together for this. I was going over the bajillions of emails back and forth because again, you had teams of people working on something that was a crossover event. So the editor has to be on top of what I'm doing and the writer's doing, and now they're having a conference today, and they decided this person's not doing this. It's all coordination. It's like you got 1,000 airplanes that are landing and taking off.
All right.
So you
So
need to
yeah.
be in contact. With King Features, I never talk to anybody.
Mhm.
I get my script. The only time I talk to somebody is if I misspell a word or whatever. I really have no
Mhm.
even monthly contact with the people that I work with, right? In comics, you would usually have your contact in the beginning and periodic contact as you went along. But again, that also depended upon the particular editor. I've done
Mhm.
jobs for DC where you could never get a hold of the editor. You could never get the person. They would never reply to your emails. You know, I had
Mhm.
other people like Mike Carlin when I worked with him. He would go over every package, or Archie
Mhm.
Goodwin, and you'd have a discussion. Oh yeah, I like what you did here. Blah 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 blah
Mhm.
blah. You would get
Yeah.
a real feedback. It's like all over the place. Some people don't like to talk to you. Some people like to talk to you. Some people are control freaks, and they don't want you to talk to anybody else.
Mm-hmm.
They want to be the person that says this. That actually used to be more the case before email and everything else. You had to talk to the editor, and if you wanted to tell the editor, you wanted to tell the inker or the letterer or something, you'd have to write a note and tell the editor, and the editor you hoped would tell the other person. Now you just, like when I go over the coloring on the Phantom, I correct it or send notes directly to the colorist.
Mm-hmm. But back in the day, it was kind of like a lot of Mary down the lane, like you had to go through. You tell him that I said, and it was more probably just to protect the editor's kind of like spot, right? Like, well, if you need anything, you come through me, kind of like to control how information comes in and out, right?
Right. I thought I would also do I would do the
Oh, and a quick question while you're queuing up whatever you're doing, Mike. Daniel's about to be the MVP of the episode, asking really good questions. He also asks, are there any personal rules or preferences for certain characters? For example, never block Superman's S.
No, I don't ever remember getting anything like that.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the thing that jumps to my mind might be that there are certain characters like Mickey Mouse, Samurai Jack, Dexter, Fred Flintstone. There are certain characters that look good as a design. They're not three-dimensional. And so you never see a downshot of something like Mickey Mouse's head because you don't do it.
It doesn't
so
work.
Everything you do, right. So everything you stage on shows like that is based on the design of the character. There were some design yeses and nos on the Superman and Batman cartoons, especially for Batman, where he would read better if you posed him in certain poses, and not as good because you don't want black on black means you don't read, right? Black on white means you read the shapes. So there would be things like that. And again, the angle that you choose, and the shot that you choose, and the use of perspective, which influences both of those, affects the shapes that you will see.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I was going to show the telos thing.
Okay. Cool.
So let's see here. So this is a couple years ago now, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
This is a couple. So, once you go, you can run with it.
Okay. So, a couple of years ago, I was involved in the Michael Ringo Tellus anthology project, and our good buddy Todd Zago gave me a script to use for my entry into the anthology, and more than not, sometimes us cartoonist types reach out to our buddies and say, "Hey, you want to give me a hand with that, or how would you approach laying this page out?" And sometimes in the case of Mike, who always goes above and beyond when he helps me out, I asked Mike if he would mind taking a crack at laying out this. It was a 2-pager, I think, which turned into 3 at the end. So what you're seeing here on the screen is Todd's script for me, where we see 2 of the characters in a sled chase from some bad guys. Let's see. And then I think the next thing you'll see is Mike's layouts.
Right. So here, I'll try to put side by side here.
Okay.
So, the Shadow Troopers bounding down. And of course, one of the things often is you'll get something and you're not super familiar with characters. right? You're not like, no, oh, that's this character or that. I mean, I read Telos, but I wasn't like if you say any of the major characters in Superman or Batman, I would probably know them. At least at one point I would know, who Perry White was, or who Alfred is, and the major characters. But sometimes you'll get a job and they'll say this guy, Pitu, looking behind them, and then Pitu, and I might, I didn't remember,
right,
right. So the idea was this big giant snowball chasing them down the hill as they're like going through this like a slalom of some sort, right? And then as the snowball is gaining, it's like running over people, that are getting absorbed, or it's getting crushing people as it picks up speed. So here I was thinking like, it's rolling around. You got one of the ninja guys, a couple guys running. You can see, again, real force perspective. And then zoop, you see the little card going up, and then you turn it back. He's looking behind him. You see them, they're going around. And then, again, really forcing the Z.
Yeah.
You can see the guys running. You see the snowball coming. He reaches into his bag, and then he has his glove. And then he fires his glove, which propels them faster. Yeah. And then it also hits the snowball, which explodes, and then they zip away through some kind of weird whatever.
Dr. Seussian Ice Kingdom, yeah.
Right, yeah, right. So what I tried to do to help Jamar was just to break it down. What I thought of what
beep, beep.
Beep. And you want to show you want to show scale. One of the things you always want to do, I think it's very important that a lot of young artists don't do, is you want to show, you see this, then you connect it. You connect it. This third panel connects, you see what they're looking at. Right? A lot of people are influenced by film. And in film, you would see the character, and you would see the other character, and then you would see the thing. What you very rarely would see in film, or not as often, is the person and the thing they were looking at.
Yeah.
This is something that is essential for comic books to connect things. In film, you have music, you have sound, color, you have movement, that all contributes in a way that you don't have in comics. And so very often I will see a script or see a page where you would see all these elements, but you would never see one panel that would combine them. And so I want these guys looking right at the snowball and right at the ninjas, right? And again, right at the snowball, right at the ninjas, right? So now if I cut in, it makes sense, right? If it cut in this big cool, but then I also want to see scale of like, oh, there's the explosion, they've escaped, and then again this is graphic design, these shapes, and again scale, these little characters scooting through.
And Mike, can you speak to the difference in, say, something like this, this is a total action script versus the talking heads? So like, what are some of the design problems to solve in something like this versus now I'll kind of, to answer your own question, like the Wonder Woman Blue Beetle thing, it seemed like a lot of your concern with doing that layout was keeping it interesting because the characters aren't really doing much, right? Right. So how does that change when you got to do too much on a page?
Well, the main difference is this is action. So I want this kinetic feel and really pushing you visually through, right? Even here, it's almost like if I were to draw a burst, a radiating burst, that's the underlying design. This thing is exploding and pushing everybody away. That pushes you into this panel, which pushes you here, which pushes you here, right? I know that there's not going to be a lot of dialogue.
Right.
Right. But I still want a sense of scale, because if I don't get a sense of scale, I don't get this. I don't get them, zooming back and forth. Right. In something like, well, then we can show the. So here's one. So this came from your. This is what the last. Right. So this.
Yeah. And I have the whole thing in front of me, but
okay. Well, you can show it. Okay. Here.
Yeah, hold on. So let's see. So this is turned into 3 pages. It's hard to do this. So then also you can see the dialogue was added, and James Afridi did an amazing job coloring this. So yeah, you can see that. So like using Mike's layouts really helped me with the design and the story element, but I still tried to add my own touches to it and not necessarily just copy what Mike put down. So, it stays on, I think on the same baseline of what Mike put out, but I feel like it's a great marriage of what I did and what Mike did.
You had and you ended up, I think, having less.
I'm doing a bad
panel. Yeah. Less panel. Well, I guess I did it in 2 pages, and you took the one panel and made it a meta panel.
Wait, hold on. This panel, this right here.
Yeah.
Oh, the other one. This right. Sorry, I'm getting seasick. Yeah. After I turned everything in, Todd said, "Can you make another page?" So I think that's where one of these came in. Yeah.
Okay.
So cool. Yeah, that was great. That was a lot of fun too. And you can also see how adding the color, it's its own complement to the story, and the word balloons and the dialogue and the sound effects, all of that kind of add to the sauce in storytelling and making a complete comic book page come to life. So Daniel says, just as a comment, that is acting like a director, not just placing the figures, but imagining their emotions and expressions in the situation. That's absolutely correct.
Right. Exactly. Exactly. Here, I'm going to bring up another page here in a minute. But continue on, my friend.
Yeah, I think, especially with young cartoonists or who are starting out, they just want to draw the cool shit. Right? It's like they say in wrestling, you got to get your shit in. So it's like, how can I have Wolverine jumping through this window? Or even Mike in the discussion of laying out a page, breaking the panels. Like you see a lot of that, like people stepping through the border panel, or stepping out of something and jumping into other things, or there's feet hanging out of the panel, touching into the next one. All of that stuff looks cool, and it's almost a little overdone. You'll see a lot of the old,
especially in the 90s, that was like every border was sawtooth and everything was overlapping everything else. And it does add a sense of dynamics, but I think it's it's like one kind of dynamic. Like I said earlier, it's like all the instruments all hitting at the same time. And one of the things about that is that it doesn't apply to any other kind of storytelling or storytelling that has any nuance. It's very teenage male, and it can be very exciting, and it might work for something, like I don't know, like Spawn or those kind of comics. But you can't really tell a story that has different levels, different moods to it, because it's all the same mood.
Right. It's all like with the turbo boost.
Yeah, you like pepper? Everything is hot pepper, right? We have 500 flavors of all the same hot pepper, right? And one of the things you learn is when to save the pepper.
Yeah.
When to save the pepper, right? That's what makes things exciting. It's context, is nuance. Same in any art form. If every scene in a movie was just cuts of shit exploding, right?
That's like people like complain about Michael Bay movies.
That's right. Everything. Well, part of the problem with a Michael Bay movie is that it can only appeal to a certain type of person that just likes kinetic. The camera spinning, kinetic. All right, and maybe that does work to some degree. And I love action. I love action movies. I love comic books. But I find that I'm tired of it after 20 minutes. Yeah. It's like, I'm tired of this, right?
Well, every time I get out of an Uber, I get out in slow motion.
You're in a Michael Bay, like you've been in the back of a Michael Bay's Uber. He's been driving you around the city like a crazy person. Oh no, you haven't been driven in an Uber until Michael Bay drives you in an Uber.
The John Woo doves come out the back.
John Woo doves fly out of the trunk as the wheels explode in a ball of fire, blowing you into your destination.
Oh, Mike, we got a great question. Our matron saint of the podcast, Mama Carla, asks, have you ever gotten a description of a scene that just couldn't be done? So maybe, Mike, can you talk to the people putting way too much into one panel and problems with things like that, like the elevator scenario?
Right. Well, there's a couple things that I would say straight off. One is one action per frame, per panel. Otherwise, you're drawing like some Carmen Infantino Flash comic where you have multiple versions of the character doing something. So you cannot have a panel where it says Joe comes in and puts his car keys down, looks over and sees the cat vomit on the floor, and goes and sits on his sofa and cries. Mm-hmm. Each one of those things is he could come in the door and look at the cat vomit. Mm-hmm. Sitting on his sofa and crying is another panel.
Yeah.
Right. Mm-hmm. Act it out. Act out your script. Just like artists have to act out the poses, writers have to act out the poses and act out their script too. The biggest challenge comes when you disconnect your physicality from what you were drawing. Be that an animator, a painter, a cartoonist, an illustrator. If you disconnect yourself physically from what you are creating, your sense of believability will go right out the window. Now, I can't stick on the wall like Spider-Man, but I can do a Spider-Man pose. I can feel a Spider-Man pose, right? Even when I'm drawing Judge Parker and I'm drawing Sophie, if Sophie is sitting in her bed and slumping, I could sit in the bed and slump, right? I'm not a teenage girl. I look nothing like a teenage girl, but I can feel that weight. I can feel that action in my body. That informs my drawing. So part of this is also acting it out. Yeah. It's like reading your dialogue out. If you read your dialogue out and it sounds really crappy, it's crappy dialogue. Whether it's a comic book or, a movie or whatever, if you read it out loud and go, wow, or the rhythm is off, or it's too long, or the internal cadence seems funky. Like you can read, as hammy as any of that old Stan Lee stuff is, you can read it out and it sounds like an old radio play.
That's right. Yeah.
Right? So, one action per panel. Don't write a long scene of somebody in an elevator. It's not visually interesting. Don't write a long scene of people sitting at a table talking to each other. Do not write a week of people sitting in a restaurant talking to each other. If they're in the restaurant, give them something to do. If you watch an old soap opera on TV, the characters are always like making coffee or doing something or lighting a cigarette. In the old day, they were doing something.
Give them something to do. Right.
Give them something to do, which also describes their character. When you would read those Fantastic Four comics, Reed Richards was always in the lab making something, right? And then the Thing would be in there holding up a machine or doing something, and they would be bickering, Then what did you see? You get to see Mr. Fantastic stretching around a machine doing something because he's Mr. Fantastic and very smart. And the Thing, who's incredibly strong, bitching because, hey, Stretcho, you know, I don't want to be holding up your thing all day, right?
Yeah.
That gave the characters something to do. You never, ever in an old Marvel comic, the best stuff, the best comics, you never saw the characters just standing there. They were always doing something that described their character.
I saw, and this was probably maybe 5-6 years ago, where I don't know if there was a period where there were writers and artists in the mainstream who were just pushing boundaries or just seeing if they could get away with stuff. But I swear I remember reading an Amazing Spider-Man issue where Spider-Man was talking to Wolverine while he ate a bowl of cereal in the kitchen, and that was like 6 pages.
Yeah. See, like one page would be good. Might be funny to see Spider-Man hanging from the ceiling upside down, eating a bowl of alphabets, and him chewing the shit with Wolverine. Right? It's like an Easter egg at the end of the Avengers when they're all having a beer. Right?
Yeah.
But visually, storytelling-wise, that's a waste of real estate. Part of it's because the edict at Marvel and DC editorially was the writers took over and became a writer-driven type of thing, not an artist or a visually driven type of thing, which was on purpose. Which you had that sort of what they call decompressed storytelling or whatever, which just to me is just boring. It's boring. I don't want to read that. If I want to read witty dialogue, I'll go read a book by Walter Mosley. You know, I'll read something like that. I don't want to. Some witty dialogue, yes, you know, and the Stan was the king of being able to do that. You know, Chris Claremont was a little bit wordier than Stan, but he still got it. The story still moved. You still had the you know, you had the family bits. You still had the action, right? And that's the stuff that's still the blueprints of the movies. That rhythm, transposed from the comics to the movies, is what still makes the movies feel like a Marvel comic to me, which is what the DC movies completely do not have. They don't have. I don't feel that rhythm. You know, I don't feel that rhythm of the characters. It's like it feels very off to me. But I have another.
Some more stuff to share.
Yeah. So it's going to show a page here, another page from Convergence. So they're at the end. They're fighting the robots, the Blue Beetle, and or the 2 different versions of the Blue Beetle. You have the Alex Ross version, and then like the Steve Ditko version. They're both cutting jokes between each other as they jump around the rocks as the blasts impact around them. The 2 beetles are sheltered behind a rock outcrop. There's blasts of energy impact above and around them. It's almost like an Old West shootout. They have a momentary cover, but the reader should have the sense that it's fleeting. The beetle starts to tell a joke, something classic like walks into a bar joke. The other one looks at him incredulously asking, "Are you telling a joke at this time?" The 4th panel, we concentrate on the beetle as he pops up behind the rock and he starts firing. The 5th, now the other beetle has popped up and they start firing. So this is my layout, which is they're surrounded by the rocks, and then pew, pew, they jump behind the rock, and then you see the robots chewing away at the rocks, right? And then he pops up and he starts shooting, and then the other guy pops up and he starts shooting. And again, you know, the bullets are flying around, right? Yeah. So it's a little funny character moment. One of the things I did a lot in this comic was use horizontal panels because it gave me more space. If I had done this grid-like, I would have compressed the space in a way that it would have made it a lot more difficult, or I would have had to draw things smaller.
Yeah.
Right.
And it's already small.
Right. Right. Well, again, as soon as you add two characters, you got to pull back.
Yeah.
Then when you got to show the two characters in an environment, you got to pull back a little bit more, right? And again, so I'm thinking right from the very beginning of these shapes, right? The robots, the shape of the robots, the shape of the rocks. This shape here is a shape that frames the characters. I want the positions of their arms and the legs. If I were to silhouette that in, I want them to read, right? And so I can very clearly read this beetle against that beetle, right? Them jumping, again, I want to be able to silhouette that so I can see each character, right? Then the rock, now they're behind the rock, and then the rock's getting chipped away. So I think of this shape, frames them, foreground, middle ground, these guys are in the background. They're also shapes, right? And then he pops up, firing, the other guy pops up. So I pull back, fire. So it's almost like he's firing this way, and then he's moving, right? He's moving over as he pops up.
Right. Mike, question from the room. Daniel asks, are you lightboxing this or redrawing from scratch? Are you lightboxing or redrawing from scratch?
So what I did here, as you can see, is I laid this out on DC. I laid it out on a piece of paper because I like traditional. Yeah. But what I did is I traced off the comic book proportion. Then I scanned it and I printed it out on my 11 by 17 on my printer, and then I light boxed it and tightened up the pencils. I basically drew the pencils. So here's the pencils that I tightened up on the light box.
Nice.
So you can see these robots in the foreground,
And we talked about this a long time ago when we were doing demos, but not necessarily that you have to spot the blacks on this page, but why are you shading in areas that you're going to ink later?
Well, for two reasons. One, sometimes you want to see. Right. Number two, I wasn't sure whether I was going to end up inking all of this, whether somebody else is going to have to come in and ink it, which is why I penciled it tight. Some guys like to pencil tight. Al Williamson would pencil very tightly. Some pencilers pencil things very tightly, even when they're going to ink it themselves. Other pencilers ink things very loosely and do most of the drawing when they ink it. Like Ricardo Villagrán is like that. A lot of the European guys are like that. Mobius was like that. The American system in general is people penciling tightly, especially with the people starting in the 70s and the 80s. Like Neil Adams penciled pretty tight. John Byrne, George Perez, most of those guys penciled very, very tightly. And in fact, those guys penciled so tight you could almost just now
just
you can
shoot the pencil.
Shoot the pencils. So it really is an individual choice. For me, it's dependent upon what I need to do with the job. If somebody else is going to ink it, I want to pencil it very tightly because I don't want them to have to guess.
Right.
If it was like Villagrán, I knew like these rocks and stuff. He's so good at drawing and things. I could be a little bit looser, but other people, you could still pencil it really tightly and they'd still screw it up. So So again, there's no one answer and no one way. Everything is job dependent. I think, especially in the beginning, the first several years is really good for artists to pencil tightly. I know everybody likes to put the X's and BWS, but you really need to see how the blacks weight a figure. You really need to understand lighting. And there's really the best way to do it is to put the blacks in.
Yeah.
A lot of guys got into the stuff in the 80s where they really got away from doing that. And it really just hurt their stuff. So now I'm going to show people some really quick. These are the guys I learned the most from. And when I was able to start learning in the beginning from reading Comics Journal, or I started getting copies of people's work, these are layouts by John Buscema. And so what he would do is he would do these full size, and then he would put this on a light box, and he would do his penciling over top of this. And everything is here. The only thing that's different later on is that the drawing is just tighter. But all the storytelling, all the perspective, everything is here. If it doesn't work here, it wouldn't matter how beautifully it was drawn later. It just would not work. But again, look at these beautiful shapes. Look how he goes boom, 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 boom. Look how look where your eye flows. And he's also leaving plenty of room for whoever writing. I mean, look at that magnificent crowd scene.
It's so gorgeous.
Look how you can read each guy's pose. Each person's pose. Look how clearly you read each person's pose. Being slightly above, as we had talked in one of our previous boot camps, a group shot, if you're slightly above, allows you to layer each guy.
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
Here's another one. I mean, look at that cat. Look at that lion. Just magnificent.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Look how you feel. I mean, these are like an animator's drawing.
Yeah.
Right? These are like, you feel the weight and the energy and the push. Right?
Mm-hmm.
There's one later he did on later for Galactus. I mean, just look at the power and the energy.
How can you not love this Mike Manley?
I'm sure there are people who probably don't, who probably don't love this. I mean, to me, there is no such thing as new school or old school. There's just school.
Mm-hmm.
There's just school. So here's another guy again. This is Joe Kubert. This is the kind of layouts that he would do for himself. So you can see where the captions are. You can see who's talking. He would draw what I call this toothpick people. Look at one thing about a Kubert page I always learned is you had something big, something small, something, and then he would tend to put the camera in a position that you would not normally be. So if you're down on the ground with this guy, that's automatically exciting.
Yeah.
Something in the foreground, something in the foreground background. He really pushes that. So you have a very dynamic sense of space and also white space, right? Negative space is space, right? Negative space is space. Just the fact that this is not exactly in the center, it's cantered over a little bit, makes that interesting. You can see how he just, after this point, he just naturally had so here's something I got from, you can see here's a Gil Kane. So he's a guy he probably is a guy even more than Buscema I really learned the most from when I was starting out, because he had a very systematic way of building his figures in space. And you can see, he's really dynamic, that sense of space.
So good.
Right? This is what they're eating when they're doing the movies.
Yeah.
When they're doing all that stuff, they're looking back at this stuff, this sense of dynamics, this sense of space. Look how clear you read Dr. Octopus's pose, Spider-Man's pose, and the arms.
Yeah.
Right?
There's not a wasted thing on that page.
So here's another Gil Kane. Again, great thing about Kane, even though he was very formulaic in some ways, that formula was something that he could rely on. And I actually learned a lot because he was very formulaic and he had this very consistent way of building his figures. Here's another one. Just a great way of building. You really feel the structure. And I react to that here again. And here's another great Kubert page. Overhead shot, little people,
Mhm.
plenty of room. And then again, a close up,
Mhm.
right? But he's
Mhm.
established this. So when you see this guy's face, you don't go, well, where is his face? You know who it is. It's this guy.
Right.
And what does he do? He drops you down and he puts that camera a little bit below. These two guys are chained up. This guy's in front. You got the stick there and the other people. Such a beautiful, beautiful page, beautiful compositions. Look at that. Beautiful black on white on black on white. Boom, 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 boom.
Mike,
Space.
do you feel like you can get different information about an artist looking at their roughs and their finishes?
Yes. I think that, okay, well, I should back up. Two things. There are artists who are renderers, and then
Mhm.
artists who are designers.
Mhm.
Neil Adams is a renderer. Joe Kubert is a designer.
Mhm.
What you react to with Neil's work, or even say somebody like Buscema, is just the great drawing, right?
Mhm.
Then you have people like Kubert, who is still a great drawer, but his drawing is more in service of the feeling, the shape, and the design, much like Kirby. So, I mean, nobody is really this tall, you
Right.
know. He would do a lot of things where the people's bodies would actually be broken to be in those positions. He's a stylist, like
Yeah.
Kirby.
Yeah.
Kirby became even more, as he went along, became more and more of a stylist. If you look at his work from the 50s, his work is very much about naturalistic proportions. So when I look at a page like this by Kubert, I'm just floored by the design, the lyrical, and the
Mhm.
use of the whole page.
Yeah.
Whole page. It's all about the rhythm of the whole page, the whole unit. Each panel is individually beautiful. And again, big face, something little. You
Mhm.
really have a sense of scale. And look, there's not a lot of rendering here. This drawing
No.
is very, very broad,
Mhm.
right? But
Mhm.
it's perfect. You read this person, you read this person, you read these guys, you read them carrying the thing, you read the little birds flying. It's much little monkeys, right? If you start looking at it, like, oh yeah, look, there's a monkeys hanging up there. Oh yeah. It is much harder to do this than people think.
Yeah, and all of this, and I like to use the analogy that I made up about looking at this stuff, and it evokes emotion from you, but to the untrained eye, you don't know why. And I kind of liken it to having a wristwatch on your arm, but not really paying attention to the gears underneath it that make it run.
Right.
And this information are the little cogs and gears and wheels that make comics special.
Well, I think this also, he's an artist that's somewhere in between at times. This touches on what we were talking about earlier in our with Kazoo,
Mhm.
uh, in that because these faces are more ciphers, it allows you to project yourself into the story in a way. He's an artist that moves, I think, kind of back and forth at times with his style because this is specifically a woman, but it's not so realistic. It's realistic, but only to a point, right?
Mhm.
And so I think, like I said, there's artists who are designers and artists who are renderers. There's artists who are renderers who you like their work because their drawing is what carries the day, but they're not great at design as somebody like Kubert, right? What you like about Alex Ross's work is the beautiful way he renders things, right?
Mhm.
His sense of design is not as lyrical. I'm not saying he's a terrible storytelling, but he's not as lyrical as somebody like Joe Kubert.
Right.
Um, Darwin Cook. Here's some roughs by Darwin Cook, right? You can read the whole story with these designs, right? They could be drawn better, but your storytelling is not going to, your rendering is not going to improve the design or the storytelling, right? You can still read position of those hands, right? You can read the girl's face. You can read her laying down. You can read it was taking his coat off and laying down, right? All the beats, all the things that are important are here.
Mm-hmm.
You can render them better. You can render them in a different style. But I think you can sort of really, to me, I break it down as the guys who are designers and guys who are renderers.
Yeah.
Right. Darwin is a designer. You know, here's another Kubert page. Kubert is a designer.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Gil Kane is a constructionist. He's a designer or a stylist, but he's also a constructionist. Right.
Yeah.
You feel he's really concerned with form. The lyrical form, much like you, especially guys of that era, they were very concerned with the lyrical quality, right?
Mm-hmm.
Frank Miller is a designer, right? He's a very good storyteller.
Yeah.
And a designer. His drawing is not so much about, drawing the correct folds or the correct knuckles, or, like, look at that car. That's like something Frank Robbins would draw. This car coming over the hill, flying over the hill like a Fred Flintstone car, right? It's
yeah.
the design. He's a designer, right? John Buscema is a designer, but he's a meat guy. He's drawing dynamics, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's another Buscema.
That's so good, man.
Another Kubert. Very lyrical. Again, you can read all the gestures, foreground, middle ground, background. So the background is darker, foreground, so your eye goes right to what's important. Your eye goes right to what's important. So always have a little bit of scale, a little bit of perspective.
Yeah.
Again, another Frank Miller. It's about design.
Mm-hmm. And I know a couple, more than a couple, cartoonists who like to collect roughs, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's even there's even a Tomorrow's Book magazine called Rough Stuff.
Right.
Right.
Well, there used to be, right? Yeah.
There used to be, just talking about rough layout pages is so interesting to study.
So again, look at this beautiful page. Even his very rough drawing, beautiful lyrical shapes leading your eye. Ooh, look how your eye just goes right around there, right? Lots of consideration of this space and this space, this space and this space. You see this space echoed a little bit here, but now you pull out. So he goes in and he goes out. Just beautiful, beautiful shape. So I learned a lot from Kubert and Gil Kane and Buscema and guys that were designers. You can learn different things. You can learn like construction and perspective and building figures from somebody like Kane. And he's lyrical. He's really trying to get this, dynamic. Look how the guy's punching. He's really punching, right?
Yeah.
But then you can look at somebody like Kubert, and he's not trying to, construct people out of that sort of George Bridgman thing. Mm-hmm. He's achieving a lyrical sense of space in a different way. But again, what these guys have is, look how clearly you can read all those gestures.
Yeah.
How clearly you can read all the gestures, right?
Mm-hmm.
Clearly read the silhouettes. You can read the attitude of this person, right? Those shapes are what tell the story.
So, interesting question / takeaway, Mike, for this is, for a budding comic book artist, should they be strictly studying comic book masters or studying film or old TV shows, or all of it, or a little bit of that?
All of it. All of
All
it. When I was a comic guy in the beginning, I studied comics, and I especially studied all these guys. And they really are the best to study. You're not going to find modern guys that do that. And if you find modern guys that are doing it, they're doing it because they're looking at the old guys.
Right. Yeah.
You know? So like I don't believe in that whole like new school or old school or whatever. There's like just school. There's just school.
Nothing but school, right?
Nothing but school. And I think people do themselves a disservice, especially when they're young and learning, by starting to classify stuff instead of just taking it in and absorbing it. Because if you're 20 years old now, you're going to be doing stuff that relates to people who are 20 now. But the formal qualities that we're talking about tonight apply no matter the age. Those are the things that you use to tell a good, exciting, clear story. And I think what happens is people get caught up in all this, like, well, you know, that was done in that was in black and white.
Right. That's old. Right. Yeah.
Yeah. You know, then you're just really robbing yourself of knowledge is what you're doing in the end. You're robbing yourself of knowledge and enjoyment. And what you do is you look at the guys that influence the guys you liked, and then you look at the guys that influence those guys. Right? You keep chasing back along the route. And so, yeah, when I started storyboarding, one of the reasons I was able to transition to storyboarding is I think I had that natural way of telling a story imprinted in my brain from watching movies and reading those kinds of comics that I was just showing, especially by, Buscema and Kubert and guys like that. They're such good storytellers. Then I learned the specifics of storytelling for cinema, which is different than telling the story in comics. One, when you're drawing stuff for movies, the aspect ratio of your composition is always the same. You don't suddenly have a skinny screen and a really long screen. It's all the same, right? So it's what happens from scene to scene. You understand. You learn to understand film language, right? Part of that was me studying old films. I would even do compositional studies. I would break down scenes and do what I call a reverse storyboard of something that I liked. I would actually teach it. That would be one of the assignments in class, would be to find a scene that you liked, not an animated film, and then do storyboard the whole scene out to see how it was set up, to study the composition, study the elements that make it work. I think part of the byproduct of my age is that the things I saw as a kid, TV shows, movies, had a very high sense of craft that carried over from the 20s, 30s, and 40s. So if you were watching an old Twilight Zone, you're getting storytelling, classic storytelling and compositions. Or you watch early episodes of any old black and white show, they did things so that it read better on little TV screens. Like everybody's got a huge friggin' TV screen now. And color made people lazy in a way because it's color, right? But if you go back and you look at an old black and white film, they had to do a lot of things to make things read, to light things better. The older the technology, the further back you go, the more restrictions artists tend to have, or more liabilities they had to work with, which made them be more creative. So I say, look at it all. Look at old stuff. Look at new stuff. If you like Miyazaki, he likes old stuff.
Yeah.
That's right?
Cool. Yeah.
And if you cut your nose off to spite your face by saying, I'm not going to look at anything past this point, well, then you probably will never really be that great of an artist.
Ooh, savage.
You will not be that great of an artist. You will not have a 40 or 50-year career. Your work will not relate to people beyond your little narrow window of influence or friends.
Mhm.
If you're talking about creating work that is universal, then you have to broaden out and understand these universal principles that I've been talking about tonight.
It's that's interesting to think about. There's such a volume of work that gets produced every year, but there's always a very short list of things that stand out, right?
And a short list of things that stand out 20, 30, 40, 50, 60 years on, right?
Right.
I think that the young artist is consumed with style, being cool, getting a job, which is understandable.
Mhm.
But if you want to have a long career, you have to have depth and
Mhm.
maturity to your work that's going to appeal to a wide range of people. Like if you just like to make gangster rap, then there will be people who like that gangster rap, but they will only like that window of gangster rap. Once you go before or whatever, no, man, I don't like those beats.
Yeah. Yeah. That's really true.
And you will find that also, if you're trying to stay employed, these principles that I'm talking about cross over a lot of different things. Comics, comic strips, graphic novels, kids' books, illustration, animation, live action, all pull on these principles that I'm talking about.
Mhm.
They all do. So, I again, just tonight, just looking over this stuff again, preparing the stuff for the show, just that stuff so excites me because every time I look at it, I learn something new or I relearn it. It's just like every couple times a year, I go out to the Brandywine and I go look at those Wyeth paintings, and
Yeah.
I see something that I didn't see the last time.
Mhm.
And that's what really great art does. As you grow as an artist, it will continue to inform you on a deeper and deeper and deeper level. And so you want to open yourself to that experience instead of saying, no, that's not cool. That's 1970s. All that does is just robs you of treasure,
Right.
of treasure.
Right. And this might sound like kind of like bombastic to think that a lot of young people hold those beliefs. But teaching for as long as both of us have, that's a lot of people's entry point. It's like, I like this. I don't know where it came from. I don't know the marks in the timeline that got that group of people to create this. At this point, I like this. I like grape soda. I don't care
Right.
about what happened before the grape soda in my hand. And it's really important that you open yourself up to the breadth of history, which makes you, like you said, makes you a richer artist in the long run.
Right. So now I'm going to do a real quick live layout, which we were talking about. Here, let me get my Clip Studio Paint.
Mike, somebody asked, Eternitine asked, is your From Script to Page book and DVD series you did with Danny Fingeroth, is that still in print?
No, that's out of print now. It was in print for a long time, but it's out of print. And one of the reasons why it would be out of print now is that the stuff that I did in it, like the Photoshop and all that stuff, that's like 19 what 90.
Yeah.
You can't. You probably can find versions of it online. I don't know if John was still selling a PDF of it.
Mm-hmm. But yeah, like some of the software things are a little outmoded, but
Yeah, we had talked about it, but the reality is I do not feel that I can sell. I can sell the storytelling, but I can't tell somebody like, oh, and then if you go and you use this
Yeah. Yeah.
2001 version of Photoshop, the button there doesn't exist anymore.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to share.
I think you still had hair back then in that DVD.
I was like friggin' Samson. I was like Samson. So here, I just pulled out. I was looking through some scripts, so I just pulled out this. This is actually from Convergence. I would get some. So I'm just going to do one page here. So this is page 1. Night in Metropolis, bad part of town. We can see the side of the dome overhead. And then you see there's a banner that says Metropolis. Now, I'm assuming that banner means that is a
with a caption.
Caption, yeah. And then from the alley, there's people in the alley. They're cutting through to the next block. Two innocent couple in their 30s walking through an alley. Never a smart move in the world of comics. The woman says, I don't know, Paul. This neighborhood looks kind of sketchy. And then the man says, a year ago, I would have agreed, but since the dome went up, old rules don't exactly apply. And then panel 3, closer on the couple walking through the alley, there are dumpsters against a brick wall, metal fire escape above them on either side, etc. And the woman, what? You think we're being trapped here? Made people less inclined for crime? Because I'd argue just the opposite. So basically, you have the couple walking through the alley, and then the 4th panel, the mugger steps out from between a couple of the dumpsters and points a pistol at them. So we need to have a setup.
Yay, comics.
Yay, comics. So the first thing is a meta shot of the couple, and so I would be thinking that now if this is a bleed book, Oh, the other thing is to always do your layouts to the proportion of the format that you're working in. I cannot tell you the thousands of times a student has done something on some raggedy ass piece of paper, panels floating everywhere, and then they go and they try to rejigger it all, that jigsaw together, and then all of a sudden all of your spaces don't work anymore.
Yeah.
That shape of that panel that you drew, suddenly that doesn't work anymore. So work to the format. So I'm thinking just right off the top of my head that there's going to be
and we know there's 4 panels because that's what the script calls for.
Right. Yeah. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And then the last panel is the big payoff of the guy stepping out on them. Okay. Okay. So, one of the things I find useful, or as a little theory that I've come up with, is that triangles make interesting compositions, especially for space. All right. So if I just start out and I draw a triangle. All right. Well, I draw a triangle, and then I draw another triangle. Okay. Now I'm going to get some dynamics. I'm going to get some dynamics of some shapes. So I'm thinking, this is an alley, right? And the people are coming down the alley, and there is a fire escape. So I start out on what I call like a visually thinking of a drawing, a visual cue. So I think of things very much like an iconographic thing, right? So I think, well, here's a shape. This says ladder to me, right? I know dumpsters have that says dumpster, right? And now I might start out, maybe I don't, maybe I want the water coming down the alley.
Ooh, trash milk.
Trash milk.
You're blocking in some shadows just for effect.
Yeah, I'm just blocking in some shadows for
For depth.
just thinking. I'm just trying to think of shapes now, right? So now I got this thing here. I don't like this over there. So there. All right. So I'm just thinking, okay, because maybe when you got an alley, you've got. I don't want to make it. Now the other thing, as I'm sort of drawing on my memory of being in alleys, we're looking at alleys.
Your long history of being in alleys. Yeah.
That's right. Living in an alley, being a bum, living in an alley, right? Now I might say, maybe I'm thinking she's looking and he's looking at her, but maybe he's like got his arm around her a little bit. All right. Now I might this is what I call a thinking drawing. I might totally change that. Right. But now I have these people walking down an alley. I've got these shapes.
Oh, Alan, I don't think this was a good idea. Trust me, Jane. You wanted to go to Shake Shack. I like the shadows.
Right. Counting in the shadow. Maybe there's a shadow on the door. Maybe there's old boarded up window. There could be extra trash.
Now part of
then I might shadow them.
Yeah.
Right. So I just see them coming down the alley. Now that's an upshot, right? Kind of above what I call the God shot, where I'm kind of above them, right? And so when I start out my thumbnails, I might be thinking about something like this, right? So we'll do that, and then so that gives me room to put my metropolis, right? It gives me room to put my caption, right? Or now I think I'm bringing this. Let's cut through this alley. I might actually reverse them.
No, you're going to flop the whole thing.
No, I keep that, but I might decide.
Oh, he's just kind of like dragging
Come on,
her. Yeah, come on,
let's
Betty.
let's go on this,
What could go wrong?
right? And she could be like, "What?"
Come on, honey. I know somebody who's got Beyonce tickets.
Huh.
They said it's legit. And this is us talking about acting, right?
Yeah. And sometimes I will redraw things 4, 5, 6 times until I feel you want to get a certain type of feel.
Now, in these script notes, there's nothing to allude to how old they are or any other notes, right? It's just kind of innocent couple in their 30s. So the innocent part is the most important key of their design. Like they're like unwitting.
Right.
Like they're not street toughs. They're just squares going through the alley.
Right. Now, it's also a little bit different drawing and talking to people
Yeah.
and uh,
The chat room is quiet.
maybe
Yeah.
everybody's bored. Everybody's bored and is gone now.
No, it's just this is always the part when we do these that everybody is just watching.
I'm drawing faster than my machine is able to
Yeah.
keep up.
And in some of these instances, for some of you guys who aren't used to watching the podcast, and when we do live drawing things like this, I like to take on the role as the layman, and I'll ask questions. I know the answer to this, but I like to throw things at Mike so he can answer it for a beginner. So, Mike, why the orange sketching pencil? What's that about?
The orange I did just because it's easier than I can go the blue over the orange, right?
Yeah. So it's just to help you see what you're doing.
One of the things I would do is I would play around with this pose until I got the feeling that I wanted. Like I might need to move him over a little bit. Is one of the things I am still not super happy about when I'm working on the Cintiq, because you don't see the whole piece at one time.
Yeah, the zooming in.
So I want to see, his silhouette where he's saying, "Hey, let's go down this alley," and she's like, maybe she's not like, "Oh, I'm not so sure about that."
Mm-hmm.
Maybe she's actually clutching her purse. Right now, that means that I would probably then take them and make them a little bit smaller, right? Like so. How much of a thing do you need to make it read as a ladder, right? How much of a garbage can do you need? But you should look at real garbage cans, right?
Mm-hmm.
So now, if I put I would think of their shadows going into the alley. There's the alley. Maybe I put part of a car back there.
Mm-hmm.
Street. There's the alley. There's a dumpster. There's another dumpster. What's up?
That's funny.
Just something funny. Did I draw something?
Oh no, Jerry Kraft said, I don't think they're going to make it to Shake Shack.
I guess not.
Now, also while you're doing this, I'm looking at your script while you're drawing. There's some visual cues in here where the mugger in the last couple panels says, "Hand over your purse, your wallet, your jewelry." So,
Right.
in the character design, Mike has to make sure that at least most of those things are visible, right? Like the
Right.
purse.
So I already started by giving her the purse, right?
Right, right.
So he's going, hey. And again, I want his arm away from his body because that makes the gesture.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, honey, let's go down this way.
Yeah.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Then if I want to, and I'm thinking right away of the fact that I would probably want this. Well, let me back out here. I would want this to all be in shadow. So just as a shape, I want this all to be shadow. So this looks pretty scary, right?
Right. And you frame the couple
Right.
very well by your eyes drawn to them in the corner.
Again, I can go look at a real alley, in the city, and I could, you could put garbage bags in there, and you could, have all kinds of other trash. You can make that a boarded up window. You can add all kinds of
Like wooden pallet, all that crap.
Yeah, all that. You got your trash milk. Got could be assigned for deliveries, all that kind of stuff. But now you see the main thing is to see them in the wanting to go down the alley, and then it's sort of a dark place,
Yeah.
right? The next panel is they're walking through the alley. Now, let's just select the type, put the type in again, because you need to do that. If you do that, then you really know, okay, how much room I've got to deal with, you know. The other thing, you might be able to float that type. Do you want to float the type between the panels a little bit to help? Right. So I'm going to go through and put all my type in. And once I put my type in, then I know exactly how much room that I have left to work with. Right.
This is a lot more verbose than some of the other pages we've looked at tonight.
Right. But again, that's what I don't have any control over that, right? That's what I'm getting. If I was writing it myself, I might have cut out some of this dialogue, but I don't have any control over that. So, right. In general, the person who's on the right speaks first, and then this person speaks next. So this, in order to get this, this is what I want. I want this. I want to go into this panel. So do I put the woman here?
Who's kind of behind the guy who's still dragging her, right?
Right. I need to figure out what's going on with this new driver I downloaded.
Is it stuttering or something?
It gives me this little dot every once in a while. I don't know if it's Clip Studio or if it's Wacom. They downloaded a new driver.
Mm.
But, I don't know if I want to. See, I could put a little purse there, right? And so now they're in the alley, and he's like, let's go. I'm thinking, this is a jerk alley, and you can see some more garbage bags and clothes hanging or things hanging up the line. And he's like, let's go. It's like, I don't want to go down that scary alley. He's like, come on.
Scary Alley's my middle name.
All right. And so,
Tim Fielder says, Mike, one of the interesting things I've found in working with writers is they tend to cramp tons of dialogue as the story gets closer to the end.
maybe I want.
Oh, I like that camera shot. I think after this experience, this lady is going to be reconsidering her relationship choices.
So maybe I would get it. Because one of the things I'm dealing with is if I want him to pull her in the alley, he's got to be towards us.
Yeah.
But now he's going this way. This also is sort of a neutral shot, but it actually makes the alley more scary.
Right.
So I could do it as a silhouette, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you see them, and she's like, I don't know. Then I'll move this over here. You put stuff in, then you can
Move it
start
around.
moving it around. Yeah. Now this is my first pass. I would go back, and I'm sure I would change things. Like I might move him over a little bit.
Right, to give some space between them.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, let's see. I want to get this guy in here. Maybe she's too big. What's this thing? Oh, might be crunching now. We'll see.
So here's an interesting question, Mike. Now that we're at the last panel and the mugger says, "Give me all your stuff." Do you need to show the stuff? Or is it
No, I don't think you need. I mean, you could. Well, I was going to do this. We'll see here. We've already established that she's got the purse.
right?
We've already established she's got her purse. So I could put it in the purse here, her purse.
Like she's clutching it now, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mike, Jerry Kraft asked a question. Jerry says, "Do you normally put that much detail in the first pass, or is that for us?"
Well,
Thank you, Jerry.
it depends. I mean, I'm doing it for you guys, yes,
Mm-hmm.
but yeah, like I have to decide: do I want her to have her hand up? Oh my God, you
Mm-hmm.
know. Do I? Do I want her to be? You could show she got a watch. She could have jewels.
Run the jewels, lady. And also, maybe with the acting, you don't want to make the guy too tough, right? As like he's not a superhero,
Right.
right? He's just a what did it say? An innocent couple.
Right. Or maybe I make him even more.
So,
again, I mean, again, like you might have him go.
right. Or like, yeah, like recoil, right? And all this is just to say to everybody watching is that, this is a sketch phase, right? And you're basically watching Mike visually figure this out right in front
Right.
of.
And then I might say, okay, he's too big. Maybe I'm going to make him. Oh, what layer is he on? That's what it is. That's the other thing. When I draw on paper, I don't have layers. Part of it is also wanting to have I like having an immediacy. And digital tools, like I'm going through right here, gets in between my flow sometimes.
Yeah.
So yeah, I like that a little bit better.
So Tim says, I'm not going to put it on the screen, but Tim says, and all this is up to interpretation, right? He says, I wonder if another take on that panel could be the couple on the left shot and silhouette of the gun on the right. Might not even need to show the thief's face.
Well, I think if you don't show the thief's face, then you make it. I mean, I don't have to actually show the thief's face here, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Like I could do, he could be a complete silhouette, and
right.
I could put the gun in this hand.
But in the script, it says a mugger has stepped out from between a couple of dumpsters, pointing.
Right. Well, again, this is one of the things that you have to decide.
Yeah.
You know, I can make him a complete silhouette standing in the alley, right? So you wouldn't.
Right.
Right. And then, you can have his hand say, "Give me your."
Right.
Right.
Like that's even creepier.
You don't even see them. You just see the gun.
Yeah.
Right in the guy's face. He steps out from behind a garbage thing. Heavens. Right. Now, let me do that. I'll save this. Now you could do what I call I call the fly around. So this might be my first reaction, my first layout, right? But he was right. I might decide that, do I want to show do I want to show the gun? And this is all silhouette, right? And then you show
them right, like dead to rights. Yeah.
Man bun. Holy shit, man bun. Because everybody hates man bun.
That's raw. I love it.
That's what you get for dating man bun.
He is getting a bad Tinder review after this.
Oh my God.
And then you can, flex the purse there with the jewels or whatever.
You can see her. She got her jewels. You can see the end of the alley down there. Right. And now you get the, and again, you can draw this in any style.
Right. There's no one answer to this.
Well, I mean, look, Jim Lee doesn't draw like Joe Kubert, doesn't draw like Jack Kirby, doesn't draw like
right.
Neil Adams or whatever. All right. So I could do that. right? I could just get a big silhouette shape of the gun. It's more, the other one was more literal. This is more of a tease, right? I think shadows and silhouettes are great storytelling devices because they force the reader to create the characters, to involve themselves more, right? So here, and then the next page could be, you see the guy, right?
Right.
This is a little teaser, boom, to get you to the next page, right? So there you go.
Love it.
And again, this is just real quick thumbnail storytelling. I'm thinking of shape, gesture. I'm trying to think of, like I could go find pictures of alleys. I could pose like, guys like Williamson would pose his hand with that gun.
Yeah.
Right? You could do it and make it super realistic, or you could draw it like, Beetle Bailey. Like, I'm not saying that oh, this is for DC, so you're not going to draw like Beetle Bailey. But, do you prefer this version to the other person? This version, sometimes you have to do the literal version, I would say.
Right.
And then you go, okay, is there another way I can do this? Can I flip the camera? Is there a way I can flip the camera and make this interesting? And again, this is just a quick thumbnail, like I would do like I was showing you that Batman stuff earlier, the other example. Just a quick thumbnail, because it's the thinking that's important, not the drawing, not whether I get the guy's lips or even get, all the fingers on his hand. It's the thinking, the design, right? Once I have this nailed down, I can do any kind of style I want, right? Style is secondary. Storytelling and where you put the camera, how you're doing your layouts, using your shape. I'm trying to use anything I can to force my eye down. So this goes here, this goes here, this goes here. This points right at the people, right? That's what's essential, right? Shape and flow and feel. You also need to, again, leaving enough room for your balloons. That's very, very, very important. This alley is a character, right? If this is a seedy alley and supposed to be Metropolis, right? I ignored what they were saying with the dome thing. If I was going to get the dome in, what does that mean? If I'm going to get the dome in, I have to make that an upshot, no matter what. You still there? Ooh, looks like we lost Jamar. Oh, you're back. Okay. I didn't know what happened.
Yeah, I crashed. Sorry.
Okay, that's okay. So I'm just going to do a real quick thing. If I was going to show the dome, right, which means that I've got to do an upshot of the city, right? If I'm going to show the dome, I got to do an upshot of the city. Right. And then I'm doing an alley. And I'm, am I going to do the Daily Planet or something so I know it's the Metropolis? All right. So there's the dome. And I guess I'm always thinking about where lighting is. This going to be garbage bags and a garbage can, and maybe this is a garbage dumpster here. Right. Then I'm going to have the same thing. The guy pulling the gal. So now I'm below them. Hey. And I'm trying to get real big gestures here so I can get his arm in. Hey, let's go down here this way.
Mike, Tim asks, before I crashed out, how often do you think using tilted frames, i.e. a Dutch, can detract or add to a story vibe?
I don't think that really matters.
Mm-hmm.
If in this case, the Dutch does give things a little bit more dramatics. So here I want to get that him pulling her.
Don't forget the bun.
All right. I mean, that's pretty scribbly, right? That's pretty sloppy. But again, it's about the thinking. You can always go back.
Tighten that up.
Yeah. What I try to do in the beginning is actually not get trapped in the drawing.
Yeah.
Right. In the beginning, it's so easy to say, "Oh, now I want to get in here, and I want to draw." I want to go in and put. In fact, what I prefer to do now is actually try to save some of my drawing for all just to keep the energy, right?
Yeah.
So I can go in here and clean this up a little bit more. So
we should start wrapping up.
Okay. So here we go. Here we got the garbage can, dumpster.
Mm-hmm.
You got the hey, let's go down here. You can put garbage cans in the foreground, stuff over there. This can. I mean, this reads as a garbage can, right? Yeah. Nobody actually uses those. Everybody uses like those.
The metal lids, yeah.
Right, yeah, right. But when I see in my mind, I think, oh, that's what a garbage. That's the cartoon for garbage can. But I might actually,
with the Jack Davis fishbone hanging out of it.
Right, but in reality, that's not what garbage cans look like anymore.
Right.
So I can keep the and sometimes it's almost like, this is one thing I would say that actually from having gone to art school, I'm much more prone to drawing and erasing and taking what I erased and using what I erased as a sort of a springboard.
Mm-hmm.
The Italians would call it the pentimenti. So here I can get the
grid, the dome,
right? The guy going, "Hey, let's go down this alley," and they're actually he's pulling her into the alley, and she's like, "What? Come on, let's go, man bun." Right?
Yeah.
So I think you can do that. You should be willing to explore a little bit, right? You should be willing to explore a little bit. A lot of people they sort of just get stuck to an idea. So I say, be willing to explore.
Yeah.
Right. So now I did the one shot, the down shot, but here I did the up shot because I need to see the sky. Right. So if I'm serving the script better, this is the shot I need. I need to see her and him, and there's the Daily Planet, so we know it's Metropolis, right?
Yeah.
Right. Now you could get a camera, and photograph this, to get the perspective more dynamic. You could pulse it out. That might actually be what I do in this case. Is I would pose to people, or spend more time really, Gil caning it and working it out. But just to break down the page for myself with storytelling, you read them very clear. Him pulling her in the alley, she's resistant. They go down, boom. And in fact, them being relaxed actually makes it more stronger. So there you go.
Brilliant, Mike Manley.
I don't know if it's brilliant, but it works.
You are, as what's on the album cover, a modern master of comics.
So
I like it. And I hope all of you guys who stuck it out with us enjoyed that. Mike, there was already some calls to do more of these. So maybe to intersperse our guest episodes with more comic book boot camp. I think our pencilers would enjoy that.
Except probably what I should do is prepare all my drawing beforehand so I can show.
Yeah.
This is like live. Everybody's so used to seeing everything happen in 30 seconds.
Yeah.
This is just an idea. It's not about drawing. It's about thinking. Right? Yeah, that's the whole point. It's about thinking. Thinking is what saves you, right? Again, you could give that layout to 50 different people and they could draw it in 50 different styles. But it's the thinking that's crucial.
Yeah. There's a lot to chew on there. Oh, Tim says the live drawing is awesome.
Oh, okay. Well, I know the younger set tends to like everything. They think that everything happens really fast. So,
or we could do a little of both, right?
That's right. We could do your thing, and you could be like, ding, done.
It's the microwave podcast.
That's right. At the end, entire 75-page story, ding, done.
All right, you guys, I'm going to wrap this up. I had a great time hanging out with Mike and his studio cats. Thank you guys all for tuning in. Just to give you some
goodbye, everyone.
To give you guys some context for what's coming up this week on. Oh man, I just deleted it. On Wednesday, the 19th, we're going to have Dawood Anibwile, co-creator of Brother Man, one of my not milestone comics, my milestone comic book experiences.
Milestone comics.
That's not what I said. Dawood is a huge influence on me and a whole generation of comic book artists. So
Was
I'm
he
real.
older than you? Is he older? Was he like
He's
the
a
group right before you, kind of?
Yeah, he's a little older than me, so he might beat me by maybe like 8 years or something like that. But I cut my teeth on his comics, and it unlocked a whole other lane that I didn't know was accessible into comics after seeing his work. So I'm really excited to have him on. Please tell a friend. We're going to have a really great episode coming up. So thank you guys so much. Mike Manley, thank you for your talent and expertise and sharing it with
You.
the world.
Thank you
Well,
for running for your talent, your expertise, sharing your. I think it was fun to show the little thing we collaborated on.
yeah, that was fun. That was fun. And I always say that when you and I work together, Mike always makes my stuff shine. So it's always a pleasure to work with you. And also, I've been enjoying those big, beautiful Wonder Woman drawings you've been putting up
That's
on
like
Facebook.
that awoke the sleeping giant. It was just funny because I posted that as a response to that rather boring Wonder Woman cover that I saw.
Mm-hmm. Oh, that Wonder Woman 84 cover. That's
Right, yeah, which is
making
like,
people angry. Yeah.
well, it's sort of like, how would you know it's 1984? They
Yeah.
told you.
They told you.
They told you. If they said it was, 1983 and a half, they told you. How would you know?
Yeah.
That's
cool.
if I were drawing a big chubby Wonder Woman or whatever, that's fine. But I want a drawing that has some life to it.
It has some.
Yeah. Bob Osner would have drawn a hell of a chubby Wonder Woman.
I believe that. We got to bring that back. So, all right, guys, I'm going to wrap this up. For my good bud Mike Manley, I'm Jamar Nicholas. You've been watching and listening to the Pencil to Pencil podcast. Thank you guys so much. Join us back here on Wednesday the 19th for another fantastic episode. And in between that time, tell your friends, Signal Boost, like, share, follow, subscribe, smash that button, all of that stuff. And don't forget to wash your hands.
Night, everybody.
Night. Good night.